I'm going to get started. Thank you. Wow, this is a really good turnout. Thank you all very much for coming out to my book launch for my very first book, The Fulfilled God Canon. So what we're going to have is I'm going to do a bit of backstory, a little bit of behind the scenes sort of thing, and then have some readings, and then we'll open it up to a brief Q&A if people want, and then I'll be signing books. Books are all here, so please afterwards come by and say hello and buy stuff from me.
More importantly than signing books, you'll be selling books.
Thank you very much. I'll be selling books. They're $20 each. And signing them. Yes. Thank you. This is why I've So, I am G.S. Slotnikov. I know. The S stands for Sheldon, actually. My legal name. Middle name. First, I'd like to thank After Dark Lounge for hosting me. It's really great to have a venue. So, yeah, what the book is about. The book is a self-help book for gods. It's basically how to be the best god that you can be. So what it is there's mythological elements, but it's also sort of mashed with modern day elements like TiVo and internet and things like that. In this alternate universe of this book, it just makes sense. It's not explained, it's just the way things are, and if you go with it, you'll probably enjoy it. It's narrated by an actual god, and I am merely the transcriber. So don't blame me for anything you read. The god in question has sort of interesting accent. I heard it very clearly in my mind, and I know how schizophrenic that sounds, but I did, and yeah, I guess when you've been around for a few thousand years, you pick up a lot of different accents. When I read, I will try my best to sort of channel that, but I can't do it as well as I can hear it in my mind, but hopefully you'll get the gist. I'll do my best. And a brief warning, there is some harsh language in the book. So, yeah, just a little warning. The first chapter is I think, light on that, so we'll ease you in gradually. And I'll get into the first chapter reading.
Let's go. Temporary cover structure.
Chapter 1. Introduction. Godhood for the masses. I am a god. A registered god, mind you. Not one of those ragtag unofficial gods. I mean, just about anybody can call themselves a god these days, but if you don't have the credentials to back it up, it's pretty much meaningless. See, you often get some guy trying to pick up chicks at the bar saying stuff like, "Yeah, I'm a god. Want to come back to my place?" Ha! Gods, are they? I pick my teeth with the bones of men like that. Gutless weaklings, the lot of them. And they taste bloody horrible besides. Yeah, I've got myself a pantheon and all. You've got to be in a club nowadays, you know? Otherwise, all sorts of fights break out. One thing leads to another, and the next thing you know, it's like bleeding Ragnarok, only with less beer. Not that there aren't pitfalls to having to hang out with a bunch of gods all the time. It's no mere coincidence that gods rhymes with sods, if you take my meaning. Yeah, the other guys are all pretty much wankers, but what can you do, eh? I mean, sure, I'll admit that I do have days where I feel like shouting at them, "Just get over yourself, people. Just because you're a god doesn't mean that the sun shines out of your arse." Well, there is Throgmar the Radiant, of course, but I think you know what I'm getting at. My worshippers are a great bunch, though. I had them build a statue in my image once. Now, I'll be the first to admit that there was a bit of controversy over this. The likeness was a bit off. It would often light itself up in blue fire late at night, keeping the locals awake, and yeah, some people who looked at it went stark raving mad. But I mean, par for the course, you know? Nothing's perfect. Then finally one night, there's this huge bleeding explosion. I heard tell you could even see it from hundreds of kilometers away. Well, until you went blind, I guess. But only if you looked directly at it. Anyway, afterwards, all that was left was this huge freaking crater 2 kilometers wide where the thing had stood. Yeah, that was pretty cool. We never did figure out what really happened. They still can't agree on whether it was sabotage by some other rival faction, or if the statue had been deliberately designed to do that. Ultimately, though, it's the thought that counts when you come down to it. Nearly brings tears to my eyes when I think about it, it does. Great guys. Great guys. But I digress. I wasn't always a god, you know. I was once mortal, shameful as it is to admit it. Once I, too, was ravished by the needs of hunger, stoked by the internal fires of survival, capable of the most heinous and depraved acts in order to fulfill my basest instincts, to keep on going for just one more day. Man, did that ever suck big time. But all that ended when I ascended to godhood. Well, actually, come to think of it, I'm pretty much the same old bastard that I ever was. Who am I kidding, eh? But the main difference is, I guess, that I don't have to do any of those things anymore. I mean, I still do them because I'm a complete prick. Of course I am. I'm a god. And I'm guessing that's why you're reading this here handbook. Because you too want to learn what it is to be a god. Maybe your old man was a god, and someone offed him, and you inherited his job. Maybe you're a mortal, and want to peek into how a god's mind works. Maybe you've already been a god for a while, but want to learn some new tricks. Or maybe you just got this handbook from a friend who's too cheap to get you something nicer. In any case, you're in for a treat, my friends. In this here instruction manual, I will be telling you folks everything you need to know. Not just about how to be a god, but how to get the most out of your godhood. To be the best god you can be. I'll be teaching you all the little tricks and dirty secrets of the trade. By the time you finish this book, you will know what it truly means to be a god, whether you want to or not. Thank you. So the first line of this book came to me out of the blue. I was responding to an email and don't remember what the conversation was about, and I just said, well, I am a god, you know. And the first paragraph kind of wrote itself. And then I thought, gee, that's a good idea, and I sort of put it in my long list of ideas and shelved it and tried to forget about it. But it kept writing itself in the back of my head, and I could hear the god's voice, and he said everything very clearly. And so I'd be like, oh, okay, and I'd write another little bit down, but it kept on going. So after a certain point, I realized I had a book, and that was a bit terrifying, because I wrote it down mainly just for myself. Most of the stuff I'd written up till then was speculative fiction, sort of Twilight Zone-y stuff. And this book is, touches on religion and humor, and those two things really don't mix well, especially nowadays. And the only reason I was able to write it was the idea in the back of my head that no one is ever going to see this. And so I was able to write exactly what I heard in my mind, the voice of the unnamed God. And he has no filter. He's been around for several thousand years. He knows what he knows. If you imagine, that relative or friend who's been around for a long time and you can't tell them anything, well, imagine that like 1,000 times as bad. Years and years and decades and centuries and millennia. So he's not politically correct. Although sometimes he tries to be. But as you read it, you'll realize he's not entirely in this century. He's picked up certain things, like I've said, TiVo and the internet and things. But he's about, like, I think he's around in the 1980s. He's gotten to that point, so you got to give him some credit. But he's a little bit behind the curve, which the last 100 years, that's just like a few days to him. So it makes sense that he's just a little bit behind on certain things. I wrote the chapters mostly in order. I've been very lucky. They sort of came to me. Some of them moved around a bit as I realized they made sense a little bit here, a little bit there, but they pretty much stayed where they were. A lot of revisions. I've done a lot of jokes that are in-jokes just for me. There's a lot of nods to J.R.R. Tolkien, H.P. Lovecraft, Robert E. Howard. And so it's a book basically for me, and the idea that anyone else would be interested in it is sort of really a bonus. It's unthinkable. But I had some friends that I'd read it to, and they would be, yeah, this is awesome. You should publish this. And I'm like, really? They're like, really? So
that'd be sort of say more about your friends than the book.
It absolutely says more about my friends than the book. But so if you don't like it, you can blame them too. I spent a lot of thought on this book, which may or may not actually be obvious, but just to give you an idea, the covers themselves, I spent a lot of time sort of researching Greek vases around the world as my travels took me, and I deliberately copied the look of Greek vases, but did my own style. You have the god with his beer in hand, of course, but it's copied from very much the look and style of the best of the Greek vases I saw. The back is based on some actual friezes. I believe it's in the British Museum. It was actually, again, another in-joke to myself. It's a fight. They're actually warriors killing each other and raping and pillaging and doing all sorts of horrible things, and I made it into a party. So maybe one day some archaeologist or anthropologist will look at the back cover and have a really big laugh. I will now read the second chapter. I need someone designated. Since I'm going to be the unnamed god, I need a transcriber. Who, I think Rick, yes. Rick, you will be the transcriber. So when I have someone to talk to. So we will get to a chapter I'm sure you'd be very interested in knowing about. It's chapter 2, On Becoming a God. Leaving your troubles behind. This is a tricky thing, no question about it. I'd say this is the most difficult part of the whole being a god process. See, no matter how badly you mess things up, once you're a god, you're pretty much golden. I mean, let's say you screw up. What's the worst that can happen? Well, yes, another god can put his mace of inner dissolution through one of your lesser-known body cavities, sure. But let's not let one isolated incident color the whole godhood experience now. Besides, I heard he did it on a dare. Okay, becoming a god. Right. I guess the best place to start is with my own experience. I remember when I first became a god. Man, was that ever a trip. There I was, a lad of maybe 15 years, and I was bloody bored out of my mind. I was born in one of those little towns where there's sod all to do, and you either leave or end up becoming intimately acquainted with the livestock. Well, I left, naturally. So off I go on an adventure, leaving behind the only home I'd ever known. And good riddance. My da was almost never around, and my ma was drunk as a skunk, like as not most nights. At this point, let me interject by saying I don't mean for this to become one of those boo-hoo tales of woe. You know, my da beat me and my ma never loved me, that sort of thing. I mean, who gives a crap, right? Grow up and deal with it like a man. Or, well, a god. But I tell you this so you know something of why I left. You know, backstory. And a little, what's it called? Foreshadowing, like. All right. Enough of this bullshit, I hear you say. How'd you become a god already? Okay, so here I am, in the middle of nowhere, on this road. More of a dirt path than a road, really, come to think of it. And there are these huge mountain cliffs on either side. So, like, there's nothing to see and nowhere to go. No food, no shelter, no entertainment. Nothing. Nothing but rock and dirt. Adventuring, I was beginning to realize, was nearly as boring as being at home. Only a lot more work. So I'm trudging along the shitty old path, hoping to see something, anything. A town, a cave, some beggar I can rip off, anything, you know? And then I hear this sound gradually getting louder, like fluttering. No, that's not right. It sort of sounded like a combination between a large flag and a heavy wind and a roaring cook fire. But I look around and there's absolutely nothing as far as the eye can see. Just me and a whole lot of dirt. Then, this just kills me even now. This guy just drops onto the path in front of me, right out of the sky, like whoomph. So here's me, too exhausted even to be shitting my pants, standing stock still in the middle of the path, looking down at this body that fell from the sky. I remember I even looked up in the air, as if I expected it to start raining bodies or something. Well, what? Oh no, there weren't nothing there, of course. Just sky. Look, I'm getting to the good part, okay? Where was I? Ah, yes. So I finally get the courage to get closer to the body, and I can see it's an old man. He's wearing this thick, ratty old cloak, and his long white hair is all askew. He's got one of those overgrown beards and some strange trinkets dangling from a necklace around his neck and from his wrists. Well, I put two and two together. I say to myself, this must be some kind of wizard. I mean, dropping out of the sky like that, it was a bit of a dead giveaway, really. I come closer. I can see his eyes are open, but they're not focusing on anything. And there's this thin layer of smoke coming from him, wafting, sort of, though I wasn't sure from where exactly. He smelled bad, too, like a wet dog that slept too close to the hearth one night and accidentally caught on fire. Well, seeing that this old dude probably had no further use for them, I decided to liberate some of his trinkets and see what else he had on him. Oh, don't give me that look. You would have done the same thing in my place. A man's gotta eat and sees fortune by the balls when it smiles at him. Or, something like that. So I feel around in his pocket, and I touch something real smooth-like, and kind of warm. What are you smirking at? Oh, hey, get your mind out of the gutter, man. It's not like that at all. It was in his coat pocket, okay? It was nowhere near his body. Man, you people these days are so messed up. Anyway, I take it out and I'm holding this palm-sized crystal sphere. Only, I'd never seen anything like it. Oh, I know, I can hear what you're saying to yourselves. It's no surprise that some kid from buttfuck middle of nowhere sees something and doesn't know what it is. But this here was something special. I just knew it. What do you mean, how? I just knew, all right. It gave off some weird freaking mojo, okay? Look, have you ever touched a wizard's magical sphere? Huh? Well, have you? Huh. Didn't think so. So I take out this sphere, and I immediately feel this sort of tug in my mind. I feel, I don't know, what's the word? Compelled. I kind of start staring into it. I don't know for how long, an hour, a day. I really don't know. And it starts glowing this golden glow. Bright, brighter than the sun. Only it doesn't hurt my eyes. And I begin to feel, well, all warm and tingly. It's a difficult thing to describe, really. Sort of like being hit by lightning in slow motion, except from the inside out. Or maybe like being smothered by rabbits that are on fire. I started seeing things, like colors and patterns and stuff. Time began to slow down. My thoughts began to empty out of my brain, like someone had turned on a faucet and forgot to turn it off. Everything became real weird-like. Seemed as though I could see right through the mountainside. I could smell every earthworm deep down in the ground. I could feel every drop of moisture on the wind come from the sea, far, far off. and I could clearly taste the tips of my toes. Yeah, I was flying pretty high, let me tell you. Yeah. Wow. After that, things become a wee bit fuzzy. When I finally came out of it, the sphere's nothing but a pile of grey ash in my hand. There's a thin line of smoke pouring off it, trailing up into the sky. And the wizard's gone too. His body's just gone. And all that's left is a few rags. They're also smoking. And then I knew. Like someone had inscribed the words in fire in my brain. I just knew. I was immortal. What was my first reaction? Well, pretty much what you'd expect, I guess. I just thought to myself, fucking A. What was that? Well, pretty much. I mean, there were other things in my mind, like the whole life story of the old wizard and how there is this evil overlord who is going to destroy the world and that I should use my newfound powers responsibly to defeat this terrible monster. Basically, it was all bullshit. I mean, there's always some poor bastard trying to conquer the world somewhere, and other equally pathetic bastards trying to stop him. Same old crap, over and over. It had nothing to do with me, really, so I ignored it. No, I never really thought it was important. Why? Anyway, getting back to my story, first thing I did was go back home and burn everything to the ground. That was freaking awesome. Awesome. Don't let anyone tell you that revenge isn't sweet. That's a load of crap. It was sweet as honey pie. No, I didn't kill anyone. At least I don't think I did. It was a long time ago, you know? But I did have a shitload of fun. What did I burn it down with? Well, fire, of course. Just took some torches and spread around the warmth, as it were. Why? How do you think I did it? Ray beams from my eyes? Man, you read too many bleeding comic books. Okay, no more stupid questions. So, I go around setting everything around me on fire, and the townspeople, they're all rallying together, and they start attacking me. First with their fists, but I won't go down. Hell, I hardly even notice at first. Then they start going after me with the usual pitchforks, knives, and such. But none of them can even scratch me. You should have seen the looks on their faces. Abso-fucking-lutely priceless. Yeah, that was how it all began for me, really. The beginning of my ascendancy to godhood. Burning down the townspeople's homes, pushing them down into the dirt, and laughing in their faces as they tried desperately to stop me. Those were such good times. Thank you. So, one last bit of behind the scenes. So, I never really intended to publish this near the end until I told too many people about it. And they kept asking me when it was going to be published. And I would say eventually, it'll be published eventually, and then I realized I would actually have to follow through. And it almost didn't happen, because I'm still terrified of the idea of other people reading it. It's first person, so it's not exactly like I can say, oh, it was someone else, it wasn't me, my name's on the front. And so anyone has a problem with it, you know, I'm it.
Stops there.
The buck stops here. And so when I started getting cold feet, I tried to keep it inoffensive. I tried to sort of edit the most offensive parts I thought out of it. But the problem was things started to unravel, because if I edited this part out, then this other part had to go, and this other thing didn't make sense, and then there wasn't much left after that. It was like pulling a bit of string on a sweater. And so it was all or nothing, and I just had to deal with that. So yeah, took a crazy amount of effort for what is really a small book. And there's lots of setbacks and obstacles, and it kept on getting more and more ambitious, but it's here. And I am proud of it. The real reason that I kept on doing it, other than the cheerleaders in my life, people saying, you should do this, but ultimately, it still makes me laugh. After all this time, after like a decade or embarrassing long time, I can still open up a chapter and it still gives me joy. And so the idea is that maybe it will give other people joy too. So that's why it's actually here. I will do one last chapter reading and then I'll open it up to a brief Q&A. And then you can be done with me. This one is called Joining a Pantheon, or All Aboard.
Are there dragons?
Dragons? I don't know if they're mentioned in here. There's probably dragons in the world, but I don't know how much they actually... Nah, probably not. There are trolls, though. Just like in real life. There are trolls. Yes, read the book and find out. All aboard the party bus. If you're not part of a gang, then you're just asking to get your arse kicked. That's just the price of being a god these days. Time was, you could be a god all on your own. No one to tell you what to do or how to do it. No one to complain about how you're not doing your job right. No union dues to pay. It was pretty sweet. But sooner or later, it had to end. And as usual, the rotten apples spoiled it for the rest of us. I mean, I'm sure you've heard it all before. Everybody's off doing their own thing, not hurting a soul. Well, more or less. When one guy steps in and starts taking advantage of the system. You know the guy. He keeps to himself. He starts fights with the weaker blokes. He spreads rumors and gossip about the stronger guys behind their backs, creating discontent wherever he goes. And he never refills the coffee maker after he uses up the last drops. Just a complete arsehole. Well, sooner or later he pisses off the wrong people and a bunch of them band together and they cut him down a notch and that's that, right? Yeah, right. That's usually the way it works. Except on this one particular occasion, the bloke in question happened to be Targalak the Deceiver. Yeah, that guy. So long story short, he killed them. All of them, and their spouses, and their children, and their siblings, and their cousins, and their supplicants, and the whole continent of Rainmar. Yeah, he was pretty pissed. I know what you're thinking. You're saying to yourself, are these morons out of their freaking minds, taking on Targalak, God-killer, devourer of life, and all-around nasty bugger, without at least 3 freaking armies and a thermonuclear device? Yeah, well, easy for you to say. I mean, it's not like he introduced himself like that. Oh hey, I'm Targalak Godkiller. Nice to meet you. Your wife is look rather lovely today. Say, what's the cologne you're wearing? It's absolutely to die for. Saw that. No, back then he was just plain old Ned. Ned, the giver of pies, actually, now that I think of it. Though to be honest, I'd kind of forgotten about the whole pie thing. See, Ned was a sneaky, low-life bastard, but he was usually nice enough to your face, especially if you had any influence or power. A lot of people turned the other eye when they heard unpleasant rumors about him, because he was, well, to be honest, because he was a really good arse kisser. Let's face it, he kind of wrote the book on that. During Ned's heyday, he was invited to all the best parties, hung out with all the coolest people, and scored all the hottest chicks. That was Ned. But beyond that, he didn't really seem to be anything special. I mean, sure, he was a parasite that fed off the crumbs left by better folk, but if you called that a crime, half of the gods and goddesses that ever were would be in prison. Not to mention 90% of modern celebrities. So we all thought that Ned was just another hanger-on. A little bit of a loner, slightly shady character with a few unsavory connections to the seedier side of things, but more or less harmless. So when Ned boinked the wrong god's girl, the cuckold got a whole bunch of his pals together and went on over to Ned's Dark Tower to do something about it. But when they eventually knocked on the door to Ned's shiny Art Deco-styled black agate, they got a really nasty surprise. Turns out that Ned was an immensely powerful sorcerer king of uncertain origin who had been patiently and deftly infiltrating the halls of power in order to conquer and subjugate the most powerful kingdoms in existence, and thus dominate the entire world with an iron fist. Who knew? Anyways, Ned didn't take too kindly to being ganged up, and the rest is history. Literally. The war of ever-burning flames, the battle of no hope, the skirmishes of futility, Targalak's last party. Those were some pretty grim times, I'll tell you. There were days when I felt like telling old Ned just to take the last damn drop of coffee already, see if I cared. But he probably wouldn't have been satisfied with that by that time, I suppose, now that I really think about it. At this point in the story, you're no doubt saying to yourself, what the hell does this have to do with joining a pantheon? And do I really need another boring history lesson? Well, here's where I get to the point. So Ned, or Targalak, Devourer of Hope as he was now known, at the end of it all, he'd pretty much bitch-slapped the entire world into submission, and was about to bend us all over and have his way with us. Or, so to speak, of course. Well, mostly. So he's getting ready to give us all the ultimate wedgie when we finally come to realize something real simple. Us gods, we have to all work as a team, or that's the end of that. I mean, not just working together, but working as parts of a whole. Until then, we'd all just tackle Targalak with whatever we had up our sleeves, certain that it'd be more than enough. Instead, all we got was a royal arse-kicking. It was painful, it was humiliating, and what's worse, the instant replay always made you look like a complete wuss. So we came up with a plan, together-like, each of us playing our designated role and leveraging each of our strengths to their best use. Yeah, I know, you're no doubt starting to hear those annoying children's sing-alongs you heard as a kid, but how working and playing is more fun when you do it as a team. Well, I have to admit, I guess there's some truth to those sayings, after all. Whether it's working together, playing together, or smiting your motherfucking soulless bastard of an enemy into the next world with naught but his entrails to keep him warm. It really works. I guess there's a lesson that we can all learn from that, regardless of our age. Once we finally cleaned up all the bits and pieces, and gods, did that not take forever? What a mess. I still haven't gotten all the stains out of my favorite pair of gauntlets. And we never did find all the bits belonging to poor Horgath the Contrite. And there's still all those uninhabitable wastelands that we left behind. But I guess it was ultimately worth it. Where was I? Oh yeah. So after we cleaned up that mess, filled in the smoldering chasm, and buried all the corpses, we realized that we should probably do something so that this shite doesn't happen again. I mean, I'm always up for a real bangin' party, but sometimes once in a lifetime's enough, you know? I still have nightmares about some of those times, I don't mind telling you. There's this one time, I'm out on the battlefield, I got some blokes' intestines around my shoulders, I don't even remember whose, and Targalak's up there on his high horse pointing and laughing at me in my undies, seeing as how the rest of my armor had been melted off by that time. Talk about embarrassing. I still shudder to think that someone might have videotaped it. That would really suck. So anyway, afterwards, we all got together and decided that in order to be a god, a real god, registered and all that, you had to belong to a pantheon. And that was that. Well, with the obvious exception of poor doomed Borth, of course. But that was a clusterfuck of a whole different nature in which I won't get into here. The idea was that each pantheon would take care of their own and monitor the others, so that there'd always be a checks and balances kind of thing going on. Everyone had to pay their union dues, and no one could leech unfairly from anyone else without being called on it. An independent tribunal was set up to settle inter-pantheon disputes, and that was that. No more massacres of the gods. No more shattering of the world's crust and wholesale upheaval of nature's laws. No more dark towers sucking in all life and light in their midst and casting a shadow on everything that was free and good. Made things a lot safer for everyone, really. Yeah. Well, the good times couldn't last forever, you know? Thank you. So now I'll open up for a brief Q&A. If anyone wants to ask me questions, now would be the time. Yes.
Gary, how was the